Good day everyone, welcome to another session in this training program on data-driven development. And the focus of our discussion is qualitative data analysis. Sa session na ito ay ipapakilala ko sa inyo ang mga core qualitative concepts, and then pag-uusapan din natin yung mga fundamentals of qualitative data analysis, and then I will show to you some of the approaches in qualitative data analysis. Una sa lahat ay kailangan nating maintindihan, malaman yung nature ng qualitative data. Qualitative data deals with meanings of the language and the actions of our participants, of our key informants, or the subjects of our study. Masasabi natin na yung qualitative data is richer and more valid than the quantitative data kasi naka-capture natin yung story doon sa area or sa environment wherein situated yung subjects natin sa study or located yung ating participants and key informants sa study. However, qualitative data is too subjective because the assessments are not made in terms of established standards. And it has become narrowly associated with research approaches emphasizing unstructured methods dun sa pagkuha or pag-collect ng information or ng data. Ito yung mga core qualitative concepts na dapat nating malaman at ma-familiarize in dealing with qualitative data. Self-reflexivity, context, and thick description. When we say self-reflexivity, it's a careful consideration to the ways in which our past experiences, points of views, and roles have greater impact in our interactions or greater impact in the way we interpret a particular interaction or context in our study. And when we say context, it's about immersing ourselves in the scene, in the environment that we are trying to make sense of or what we are trying to interpret or what we are trying to explain. Pag sinabi po nating thick description, it's our way of immersing ourselves dun sa kultura na pinag-aaralan natin. Dun sa particular circumstance na present dun sa environment na subject ng pag-aaral natin before we create a statement, before we generate conclusion or build theories. Dito po, hindi sineseparate ng researcher or ng investigator yung meaning dun sa description, dun sa malalim na contextual description ng pinag-aaralan natin. Now, let's proceed to the main topic of our session, and that is interpretation and analysis. Generally, there are several fundamental approaches na pwede niyong magamit in qualitative data analysis. For this session, we will focus more on coding data segments for category, theme, and pattern development. Pag-uusapan din natin yung dalawa pang analytical strategies in qualitative data analysis like Jotting and Memoing. Ito yung tatlong approaches na pwede niyong magamit at ma-apply when you do qualitative data analysis in your respective locality para ma-achieve yung purpose natin sa training program na ito on data-driven development. Since the focus of our discussion in qualitative data analysis approaches ay naka-centered dito sa coding, kailangan natin maintindihan ang difference ng mga terms na ito. Kasi magkaiba po yung codes sa coding. Pag sinabi nating codes, you're referring to the labels. And pag sinabi naman natin coding, we are actually referring to the analysis of the codes that we put on the information that we have collected during the period of our study. Hence, codes are labels that assign symbolic meaning to the descriptive or inferential information. Yung mga codes are usually attached to a specific chunk ng information natin na nakuha. Magkakaiba man yung size ng information, ng data chunk, pero we assign a specific code for them. And they are usually take the form of a straightforward descriptive label. And when we say coding, sinabi natin kanina na we are referring to the analysis of the code. So, coding is a deep reflection, at the same time, deep interpretation of the meaning of the data. Yung story ng data na nakuha natin during data collection. Coding generally involves two major stages: the first cycle coding and the second cycle coding. Sa first cycle coding, ito yung phase na nagbibigay tayo ng label dun sa data chunks or sa mga portions ng information or portions ng data na na-collect natin. Sa second cycle coding, ito yung part na kailangan na natin i-analyze yung mga labels na binigay natin sa mga data chunks ng information or data chunks ng kabuang data na na-collect natin. Ngayon naman ay pag-usapan natin yung mga iba't ibang coding techniques na pwede natin gamitin in doing our qualitative data analysis. Una ay yung descriptive code. Ito yung pag-a-assign ng labels to the data in order to summarize the basic topic dun sa qualitative data na meron tayo. It can be a label to summarize a word or a short phrase. Eventually, magagamit natin to provide an inventory of topics for indexing and categorizing. And in practice, this is more appropriate for social environments than social action. Next is in vivo coding. Sa pagsagawa ng in vivo coding, tayo ay gumagamit ng mga salita or short phrases galing mismo sa participants or key informants ng study natin. It is considered as one of the most well-known qualitative coding methods or technique. Kaya it is appropriate for beginning qualitative researchers who are learning how to code the data. At the same time, ito yung appropriate doon sa mga studies and researches na nagbibigay priority sa voice ng participants. And it is often pointing to the regularities or patterns in the setting of the study or doon sa lokal ng study. Ang process coding naman ay nag-highlight ng mga observable and conceptual actions sa data natin. Kaya it is appropriate for extracting participant action and the interactions among participants, including the consequences of their actions and interactions. Samantala, yung emotion coding ay yung pagbibigay ng label doon sa emotions na kayang i-recall ng researcher based doon sa kanyang observation and experience sa pag-collect ng data sa participant. Thus, doing an emotion coding will provide us the insight into the participants' perspectives dun sa worldviews ng participants natin, including life conditions. So, yung pinagtutuunan ng pansin dito ay yung emotions ng ating key informants or ng ating participants sa study. Kung ang purpose naman natin ay to explore cultural values, identity, intrapersonal and interpersonal participant experiences and actions sa isang specific na case study or sa isang appreciative inquiry or oral history and critical ethnography, ang pinagtutuunan naman natin ng pansin sa pag-analyze ng information ay yung values. So, value coding or values coding is an application of the important attributes of ourselves, another person, a thing, or an idea. This is an application of the three different types of related codes sa qualitative data. So, it can be values, attitudes, and beliefs that represents the perspective or the worldview of the key informants or the participants of the study. Kung ang purpose ng study natin ay nakafocus doon sa judgment ng ating community members, ng ating mga constituents or stakeholders, primarily sa mga policies na inadapt ng agencies natin, sa mga policies na i-adapt pa lang natin, pwede natin gamitin yung evaluation coding technique. Because evaluation coding technique assign judgments about the merit, the worth, or significance of a particular program or a specific policy. Kaya appropriate ito sa policy studies, sa critical, action, organizational, and evaluation studies as well. And lastly, attribute coding is a technique that would provide us the notation of basic descriptive information such as the fieldwork setting, the characteristics of our participants, the demographics, data format, and other variables of interest for qualitative and some applications sa ating quantitative analysis. So, yung attribute coding is just a description, general description of the kind of environment where we are conducting the study and the kind of participants, the kind of key informants that we have in our study. It gives essential participant information for future management, for future reference, and context of analysis during interpretation phase. At dahil napag-usapan na natin yung mga iba't ibang coding techniques in analyzing our qualitative data, kailangan lang natin ng mga konting reminders sa ating mga codes na inilagay doon sa ating mga data chunks or frames sa information. Yung mga code frames natin, kailangan na flexible so that we can make the most of our results and use them in a different context. Sa pag-create po natin ng codes, we need to make sure that we can cover several responses, that we can contrast one response from the other, and strike a balance between too much and too little information. So, kailangan po natin ng consistent coding. Ito yung importante. Consistent coding. Kailangan po na kung ano yung label nilagay mo sa ganitong frame ng information na na-collect mo or ng data na na-collect mo sa isang tao or sa isang key informant, ganun din yung code na ilalapat mo if you encounter the same information or similar information dun sa other key informant. Yung codes kung anong ilalagay, it's up to you so long as you can recall what's the meaning of that code na inilapat mo dun sa data chunk or sa frame ng information. So, what pattern codes look like? Ano yung ini-expect natin na mangyari after we code? So, pattern codes usually consist of 4 often interrelated summarizers. From the coding and categorization processes, you will naturally start to notice na merong mga themes. Therefore, the logical step that you can do is to identify and clearly articulate the themes in your dataset. Kailangan yung hanapin yung themes. Ano yung mga emerging themes doon? Ano yung mahanap mo na mga tema na karaniwang pinag-uusapan or sinasabi ng mga key informants nyo when you talk about this particular topic? When you determine themes, you'll take what you've learned from coding, what you've learned from categorization, and group it all together to develop and to create certain theme for this particular responses or information na na-extract mo dun sa mga key informants mo or sa participants mo sa study. This is the part of the coding process where you'll try to draw meaning or you try to reflect more and to describe, extract, and make stories based doon sa mga na-capture na information doon sa coding process. Then, you produce your narrative. In relation to that, there are information based doon sa coding na nag-explain why these things happen. Bakit ganito yung galaw, ganito yung responses, ganito yung emotions ng mga participants mo, ng mga key informants mo. What would be the cause? Bakit ganito yung behavior? So other than themes, we expect that we can get information or extract information kung bakit ganito yung behavior ng mga tao natin sa ganitong phenomenon, sa ganitong pangyayari. Ano yung mga causes nito? Ano yung mga triggers? Next, you also can find the relationships among people. Ano yung pakikitungo, ano yung behavior ng mga tao towards other people dun sa kanilang paligid, dun sa kanilang environment. Or ano yung relationship na na-establish or na-observe natin between and among people or people in the community and other sectors, including the government. And for example, business sector also, and NGOs. And lastly, ano yung theoretical constructs na mabibuild natin based dun sa observations natin, based dun sa mga pattern ng codes na nakikita natin, na-observe natin. Ano yung conclusions na makikita natin na pwede nating paghugutan ng inspiration in, yun nga, developing policies for improvement of our locality. Yung pagpili ng desisyon na pwede nating gawin, pwede nating i-implement para mas i-improve ang situation ng ating community, ng ating locality. So, babalikan lang natin ng konti kung ano yung mga takeaways natin, ano yung mga important aspects ng discussion natin about coding as a technique in qualitative data analysis. In first cycle coding, ito yung way to initially summarize segments of the data. Ito yung assignment of a particular label sa specific data chunk. And of course, when you have already your codes assigned to segments of the data or data chunks, makaka-establish ka na ng pattern. So in doing pattern coding, it is a way of grouping those summaries into a smaller number of categories and themes or constructs. And these pattern codes are explanatory or inferential codes in nature in order for us to determine kung ano yung mga emerging themes. Ano yung mga ma-observe natin na patterns sa responses and sa actions ng ating mga participants or key informants. And explanation or yung story na na-capture natin based on sa information or data that we have collected. Thus, they pull together a lot of material from first cycle coding into a more meaningful and parsimonious units of analysis. Another useful analytic strategy na pwede niyong gamitin when you do qualitative data analysis is jotting. Just try to imagine having these sticky notes. And try to imagine these sticky notes as your analytic sticky notes. Yung mga piece of papers na meron kayo na pwedeng mag-fit dun sa mga small spaces that you have dun sa mga gamit nyo when you do fieldworks. In some applications, may mga features katulad nito. Like in PDF, you can have sticky notes features included dun sa application na can make your life easier, particularly if you're doing fieldworks na meron kayong dalang laptops and other gadgets with you. So generally, what is jotting? So a jotting holds the researcher's fleeting and emergent reflections and commentaries to issues that would emerge dun sa pag-collect nyo ng data or when you are at the field collecting data. And also, especially in data analysis, may mga reflections kayo, may mga commentaries kayo sa mga information na pinipresent or mga information na ina-analyze nyo. So, you can do that also using the comment na feature na pwede nyong makita sa Word document if you're using MS Word. And in doing this, using jotting as a technique, as you work on your field work or doing data analysis, you can have some reflections or you can jot down some reflections para magbigay ng another information or make people more aware of the things that we have observed during data collection and data analysis. So, ano-ano mga pwede niyong mailagay dito sa mga sticky notes niyo, dito sa mga comments niyo, dun sa mga small piece of papers na meron kayo para mas makatulong dun sa pag-elaborate ng possible information na na-capture natin or pag-elaborate, pag-explore further dun sa mga data na ina-analyze natin. Ano ito yung mga example na pwede nyong i-consider when doing jotting? Una, inferences on the meaning. So, inferences on the meaning. Then, your personal reactions dun sa time na nagko-collect kayo ng data, you can jot it down, or personal reactions dun sa mga information na ina-analyze nyo. Then, what the relationship that you had during data collection dun sa mga participants? Ano yung feeling mo? So, feeling and relationship na na-establish mo when you do data collection. So, this goes with your participants. Then, also, you can jot down the doubts that you feel on the quality of some of the data that you are analyzing. That includes also the second thoughts about some of the interview questions and observation protocols. So, also, pwede niyong gamitin na maglagay kayo ng mga reminders. For example, na kailangan nyo mag-cross-referencing sa iba pang material na pwedeng mag-add ng information sa current dataset na meron kayo to further elaborate, to clarify further doon sa mga data na meron kayo para mas ma-explain nyo yung na-collect nyo na data. Mas ma-explain nyo ng mabuti, ma-clarify nyo ng mabuti yung mga nahinuwa nyo doon sa pag-collect ng data at the same time sa analysis. So, yung mga further elaborations na pwede nyo gawin, yung further clarifications na kailangan nyo i-revisit para mas malinaw at may weight yung pag-present nyo ng analysis sa readers at saka sa mga taong gagamit ng inyong results sa study na ginagawa nyo. Similar to jotting, yung pagsasagawa ng analytic memoing ay naka-centered dun sa reflection mo as a researcher. Pero yung pinagkaiba, yung analytic memoing ay isang brief or extended narrative that documents, that presents, that lays down your reflections and your thinking processes about the data. It's an attempt to synthesize the data into higher level analytic meanings. So, in general, analytic memos are conceptual in intent. hindi lang nila nire-report or hindi mo lang nire-report yung data, but you puzzle or tie together different pieces of data into a more recognizable clusters. Often, to show that those data are instances of a generic concept or general concept. So, it intends to elaborate more, especially when they piece together several strands of data or look across multiple measures of construct. So you need to look into the documentation of your reflections as a researcher. Documentation of the thinking processes that you have about the data. And these can be developed along the following topics. Pwede yung ano yung personal, paano ka personally nakaka-relate doon sa participants, or paano ka personally nakaka-relate doon sa phenomenon na pinag-aaralan mo. Ano yung mga na-identify mo rapidly as you go through the data ng mga emergent patterns, categories, themes, concepts, at ano yung mga assertions na na-develop mo. So the possible networks, like mga linkages, connections, overlaps, flows among the codes na nilalagay mo. Ano yung mga links, connections, overlaps, flows ng mga patterns, ng mga categories, ng mga themes, and concepts and assertions na nabubuo mo as you appreciate the data. So, doing an analytic memo is useful and powerful sense-making tool that you can do in data analysis and in appreciating the data that you have collected. So, ano-ano yung mga importanteng ideas na lagi nating tandaan when we do analytic memoing as one of the strategies na pwede nating ma-apply sa ating qualitative data analysis. Una, kasi nga nakafocus tayo dito sa pag-document ng ating ideas at pag-document ng ating reflections in appreciating and analyzing the data that we have collected from our fieldwork. So, we need not to focus more and to worry more our writing style at grammar. Hayaan natin yung ideas natin na ma-document natin. So forget about whether you write it in a wrong grammar or hindi maganda yung pagkasulat or yung writing style. So don't bother about these things. Yung dapat natin tandaan ay ang pagsasagawa ng memoing or ang pagsusulat ng memos ay dapat magsimula as soon as the first field data start coming in. At magtutuloy-tuloy na ito hanggang sa pag-produce natin ng final report. Dapat din natin tandaan na when we write memos, make sure na pwede natin sila ma-sort out later on. So what we should do is always caption them by basic content para mas madali yung pag-sort out natin ng mga ginawa nating memos. At katulad din ng sinabi ko earlier, hindi dapat naka-standardize yung memo formats. In the same manner na hindi natin dapat i-focus yung sarili natin sa writing style saka grammar. Kasi nga, ang focus natin ay yung ideas na dapat natin ma-document. Kasi yung paggawa or pagsulat ng memos based sa appreciation natin ng data, based doon sa mga pumapasok na information, will contribute strongly sa pag-develop natin or pagbuo natin ng ating coding system or sa pag-revise ng ating coding system should we have revisions later on sa coding system natin. Kasi nga pwede siyang mag-change depending on how we appreciate and how we reflect on the data that are coming in. Yung memo writing, nakakatulong din siya para makabuo tayo ng sharp or meaning ng tumpak, ng concrete na clarifications or insights doon sa mga pinag-uusapan natin, doon sa mga themes, doon sa mga categories, doon sa mga assertions and other concepts na nabubuo natin during the process. At minsan, nakakatulong din ito sa pagbuo ng mga bagong concepts, sa pag-develop ng bagong concepts na pwede natin ma-expand, na pwede natin ma-elaborate, na mas makakatulong sa atin in capturing the real picture, in capturing the real story sa environment or sa lokal ng study natin. In such a way na makakatulong din siya sa paggawa natin ng mga desisyon para mas mapaunlad natin ang ating mga komunidad. At dito nagtatapos ang ating session on qualitative data analysis. Hopefully, you have learned something from the discussions that we had, particularly on the approaches and the strategies in qualitative data analysis. Sana ma-apply nyo yung mga natutunan ninyo upang lalong mas mapatibay yung mga decisions natin, lalong concrete yung basis ng mga plans natin na isasagawa para sa pagpapaunlad ng ating mga komunidad. Nang sa gayon, maabot natin yung mga goals natin sa programang ito na data-driven development. Muli, maraming salamat.